Hey everybody, Jatt here with another edition of League of Learning, and today I'm going to be talking about elemental dragons. It's one of the biggest changes from the midseason, and there's a lot to talk about here. So first off, I'm just going to go over some of the basics. There are 4 different types: Cloud, Ocean, Infernal, Mountain. Obviously, Elder Dragon comes at the end, but in the first 35 minutes is just these 4. No more than 3 types can spawn in one game. You can get no more than 3 of one type in the same game, so you don't get these insane stacking scenarios where you have 5 Infernal Dragons. Up to 6 Elemental Dragons can spawn before 35 minutes, and then after 35 minutes, it's only going to be the Elder Dragon. And you should see teams contesting these much more because these dragons are all more powerful than the dragons you saw last year. And contrary to popular belief, every single dragon is actually very strong. And I actually think they're very close in power. They're just strong in different parts of the game. So let's go through them one by one a little bit. First up, I want to talk about Cloud Dragon, because most people think this is the worst dragon, but I think that's just not true. I think it's very close in power to all the other ones. It only grants 15, 30, or 45, based on the number of stacks, additional movement speed out of combat. And compared to some of the crazy things you get from the other dragons, this doesn't seem like much. But the rewards this can give you through roaming and getting to objectives first are so strong in the mid-game. It's not going to help you that much in the laning phase because you're almost always engaged in combat. But as soon as you start moving between lanes, it helps your ganks. And when you kill someone on the other team because you're there first, you get a lot of advantages. So I think Cloud Dragon is definitely the most underrated of the dragons. Another dragon here is the Ocean Dragon. This one, when I first started playing with it, I thought it was the most powerful dragon because the amount of regen it can give you, especially on mana-hungry or health-dependent champions like a Soraka, Sona, or Swain, it's incredible. Really late into the game, it's not going to be as strong because the fights are very explosive. But in the mid-game, when fights aren't quite as explosive, if you don't die, your ability to stay out on the map is incredibly powerful. And I think that's the biggest strength of the Ocean Dragon. The dragon everyone thinks is the most powerful because it's the most visceral is definitely the Infernal Dragon. It grants 8 to 16 to 24% increased ability power and attack damage against champions. So it's not going to help you kill minions or objectives, but it's going to be that raw power in fights that everyone really wants. But if we think back to the first dragon buff from last season, that was 6% attack damage and ability power, and that wasn't very strong in the early game. So Infernal Drake follows the same power curve, where it's not that great early, but then it scales up in power as you get more attack damage and ability power to multiply. So still a very good dragon, just not insane at all stages of the game. And then Mountain Dragon. I said Infernal Dragon was good in the late game. I think Mountain Dragon is even better in the very late game because the 10 to 20 to 30% additional pre-mitigation damage to epic monsters and turrets is insane. That means if you have 100 attack damage, even with the first stage of the buff, every auto attack will do an additional 10 true damage to that objective. And because Elder Dragon and Baron are such incredible objectives late game, the fact that you can take this with a couple buffs at close to double speed makes it insanely powerful in the late game. And I think post 35 minutes, this is the best dragon to have picked up because of that objective control. Obviously, after 35 minutes, we get to the Elder Dragon as well. It spawns after 35 minutes. It's on a 10-minute cooldown timer, so when you get it, there's a bit of a cooldown period afterwards because the buff itself only lasts 2 minutes, and it gives some pretty powerful things. It enhances the previous dragon buffs by 50% to make you even stronger with the ones you've already obtained, and then it also gives you this Cruel Ultimatum 2-minute buff, which is a strong true damage burn. And the more dragons you have, the stronger that burn becomes. So it makes siege situations just laughably easy if you have this dragon buff because you kill the enemy team so quickly. And as an encounter, you can't necessarily rush it unless you have the Mountain Dragon because the health is actually exactly the same as Baron Nashor at 35 minutes into the game. So definitely not your everyday dragon, much more powerful, and you need to be careful when you take it. So that was a lot of information on dragons. I hope you learned something.